Hello people, this is Ryder here with a review of the Kamen Rider Geats DX Geats Buster QB9. So yeah, since Wizard, just like the fact of how, since that series we haven't had a final form weapon, or not that, we never, since Wizard of having a final form item that had character phrases, this is the first time in a while that we've actually had a traditional final form weapon, because the cross saber is still like basically that return, but like that was a transformation device. But I mean, like basically cross saber, I would say it was more of like Heisei Phase 1. Like, like Hibiki had the armed saber, and like Kabuto, not Kabuto. Does the drag visor Savai count? Fi's blaster, like basically that's what cross saber had. But this one in particular is more in line with like Heisei Phase 2 and such. So as you can see from here, it's just the Magnum Shooter 40X, to the point they did the same pun, QB9. Because obviously 40X is supposed to be Fox, and this one's supposed to be QB. So this shows you everything you can do with it, all the compatibility and fun such. Cautions and warnings, the batteries it takes. Geats 9, using it in its blade mode. Showing this thing in its 2 modes, QR code for the PDF file, just everything this can do. And I'm pretty, because yeah, this is the same exact render that was on the race buckle. Good at nose, because they just used the one from him using the sword. Here it is out of its box. So yeah, like it's just a retooling of the Magnum Shooter, which I guess makes sense for what they're trying to go for, to the point it still has this, but they actually modified it. It's definitely interesting. This is now heavier due to the blade portion and such. I mean, I think it's fine for what it is. It's definitely creative. I really do like how they streamlined this back piece, because I found, like, I get they wanted to get rid of the Fox stuff, but I mean, this is a smart way of retooling this piece, because now it actually fits in. Like, that's really cool. Other than that, like, they basically inverted the colors and then just changed the black into red. That's kind of what it is. It still obviously has this, so you can slide it in like so, but I actually found something neat with it. Speaker holes right here, obviously raised buckle compatibility from here. So this is technically railgun mode, which is pretty interesting, because I think you can, shoot from here or here, or I guess it has 3 holes you can shoot. I mean, I guess it's cool that it's a railgun. We never had a railgun. And like, the red paint and like the red and silver paint up here are pretty neat and such. It's just not painted in the back. I'll say be careful whenever you try to switch modes, because what you have to do is just simply hold this button back. You want to make sure your finger's not here, because then you're going to pinch yourself. So then you just simply swing it from here, and then there you have blade mode, which, look, I get that Michinaga, like, used this thing as, like, I get he used this thing as a baton, or like, to like whack enemies with, but the fact they took that temperature, I get, like, I guess that's where they got influence from this, or just making this into a sword. It's interesting for sure. It's basically the same size as the Raising Sword, but I don't know. This is definitely interesting for sure. Just because I don't know. Just this, all of this space you have, like all of this blocking your way of like trying to like strike your enemy is just hilarious. But as I've already tried to compare before, here's the Magnum Shooter 40X compared to the Geats Buster QB9, and yeah, you can just see how different the shades of white are. Like, you can just see how much bluer this white is compared to this white and such. And obviously there's no point in comparing the modes, because obviously this doesn't extend. And the funny thing is that this hole is still here. You just can't press it and such. And I actually found a cool way of holstering the sword, which I'm pretty sure is the way you're supposed to holster it. You can just, you know, do that, and it like surprisingly works. Like, I actually like holstering this thing in the sword mode. It's really cool. Like, wow. Anyways, turning this on, this thing does have a pull tab, but you know, it has an on-off switch, so we don't need to use it, or we don't need to keep it. DX Buster QB9. So there's the announcement for the weapon. Obviously, red LED if we were to fire. You can just tell how much less tactical it is, I guess, or like realistic, because now it's just like a pew pew and such. And then to switch modes, obviously, you just press this button up, flip that up. This is going to be weird framing, and then press the trigger like so. So this is a red LED and such. So obviously, just like the Magnum shooter, you can pull this back. For the boost charge, you get the standby, which sounds like a merry-go-round. There we get the boost tactical victory in sword mode. So it's still tactical victory, but you do get a new attack sound. So obviously at this point we can use our raised buckles and such. So here we will use the Mark 9 buckle. Just simply slot this in like so. So there we get that, and basically at this point, unlike the Magnum shooter, if you were to just attack, it will just basically act like nothing. So you actually do have to activate the raised buckle to actually initiate the finisher. Because then it will restart the entire like standby process, and then just press the trigger. And there you get the finisher, Boost Tactical Impact. So it's really cool now that the Geats Buster actually does give these buckles some time to announce themselves, just so then like they're not heavily interrupted and such. And then if we were to try to use Mark III, we actually can't, because of the kitsune mask being in the way, which is unfortunate. Because if you were to actually get that in, it will actually, another new thing of this, so we would just use Boost Mark 1. And rev it. So as you can tell, the thing too is that this thing actually, like, so while it will announce the buckle you insert, it won't actually mimic the sound of, like, actually activating it, which is honestly unfortunate. But, basically, if you were to use, like, if you were to use Mark II and Mark III in this, it does actually acknowledge them as their individual, like, versions. It's just unfortunate that through normal means you can't use them. So we'll just do some of the advertised ones they did. So, like, here's Magnum. Oops. Accidentally slightly twisted it. But here we'll do water. Sometimes this obviously just like all Geats things, sometimes they don't even want to read, which is kind of annoying. So basically, like, the finishers obviously just like the Magnum shooter don't change, but at the same time, like, it will read the buckle, but it won't like necessarily like change anything and such. So like, at this point, we're just going to like use. We're not going to do any attacks. I'm just trying to figure out what else we can use. Like, here's Monster. Propeller. Actually, Zombie. Spider Phone. The majority of these are re-recordings. Some of them aren't. What have we not seen? Here's Claw. And then we will end this with the King Ultra. And yeah, that's basically a summary of this thing. So the camera, like, we're gonna have to not blast this, we're gonna have to trek through this because camera wants to overheat, but we have to finish this out. So yeah, my thoughts overall on this toy, it's cool to like have this basic, like, it's cool that they finally did a final form weapon, like in a traditional sense, obviously. And it's cool that this thing can actually read the raised buckles to finally give you, or to give us our third retail toy that can read the buckles fully via the track, but technically our fourth. Though it's kind of like, it's cool that it'll like say the names of the buckles, but then it just kind of doesn't really result into anything. Because in my opinion, I feel like this thing's kind of very similar to the full bottle buster, where it was like, oh cool, like we can use our full bottles and such and like chain them, but then it just, the resulting, like, I guess, conclusion is just not satisfying, because obviously with the full bottle buster, for example, it's cool that you're able to like have like the bottles say their names when you chain them up, but then like you don't get anything special out of it. Like it doesn't do a roll call of like the bottles you put in and then full bottle break. It just cuts to full bottle break. Obviously, this is not in the same point of like actually like. I think basically I would have just liked if it actually did refer back to the buckle. Like it does in a way when you activate it. But then like it just all results into a boost tactical blast or a boost tactical impact and such, which is I think I'm just more disappointed about the fact it doesn't do the respective sound of the buckle when you like use it. I don't it's basically the same as come on. It's basically like my gripe with like the Vision driver whenever you actually have the hacking on, where like it doesn't even like play the sound of the buckle. It only does like a generic sound, but even then, it at least plays the generic sound. I also forgot to state this with the Vision driver, but with Boost Mark III, I'll actually turn it off at this point. Boost Mark III, you can only twist it this way because there's only that's where it's only there's only clearance to turn it this way. Because if you try to do it this way, you're gonna get it stuck. It's not even like focused, but you can only twist it that way. Other than that, like it is cool to have this. It's just that I just feel like it doesn't do enough. But at the same time, it does have one thing over the Magnum shooter, to which we will only be able to cover whenever we actually can cover the Legend Rider buckles. To which is the fact it actually acknowledges them. That's basically this thing's selling point. Even though it's not much, it's cool this thing does have more of a reader than the Magnum shooter to an extent. But at that point, it's like, it's sadly not, when you think about it, it's not really as much just due to how small the Geats toy line is, or just how small all the programmed sounds are in the Desire driver. So it's not really like, they basically just had to program like an additional like 30 phrases. But like other than that, like it's still a cool selling point. It's a weird selling point. That this thing, it's like, oh yeah, this thing can now actually acknowledge the Ryder instead of just genericizing it and such. But other than that, like if that's like a huge selling point to you, then go for it. I can definitely see this being a huge skip to most people, just because this one doesn't actually have a buckle, so you're not forced into buying it. But even then, the Magnum shooter, you didn't need to get it. I just feel like the only other positive thing within, like, as I addressed before, is that when you actually use buckles that actually, first of all, fit, and the buckles that make their own sounds, I like that there's a way. I like that it actually gives like time for it to actually say its thing. To like that's why like it basically does like I don't know, a full circle on like actually bringing reason as to why the buckles announce themselves. Like for example, like I don't know, like you know what, Powered Builder for example, because I feel like that one's the most satisfying one. Like it's just actually cool to genuinely actually have some usage for that sound that isn't just by itself. Like you can actually incorporate that sound now when you actually use this weapon. Like I think that's cool. The only one that's kind of tricky to do is Command Twin, just because you're gonna have to like basically when you like actually use it, you're gonna have to like lift it but then like press it immediately. And luckily I did get that in the demo, but like just because of how this sound, just because of how much time is given, I think the sound's like it's a bit too short for like the given time, but oh well. But you know, as the last toy in the retail line, I think it's fine. Like if this is the toy that, and also if this is technically the only way we can have final form weapons, if like if they basically have to retool a weapon from the first quarter, I think it's fine. Like, I think it, like, if this is the resurgence of Final Form weapons, that would be cool. Because, you know, basically, at least, especially during, like, Heisei Phase 2, I think it kind of got annoying when the Final Form weapons either utilized weapons from the second or third quarters, or especially the second quarters, just because I feel like at that point it didn't really make sense. Like, obviously within the show they try to contextualize it because they always try to say, well, the final form is supposed to encapsulate like all like the previous powers and such, but it's just like, but you really couldn't just do a final form weapon. I just think overall, like, I I feel like we can't really talk about the Geats. We can't really conclude on the Geats toy line yet, like as a whole. But I think retail wise, it's, I don't know. Like, I feel like the retail line and the Soto line are basically the same. They had very promising beginnings and then very bad downfalls. But I mean, I think the Soto line was a lot worse just due to the lack of communication from that blog. But obviously, we're not talking about that. I think toy line wise, I think Geats definitely had a more powerful second and third quarter than in recent years of Reiwa, or compared to like the last few years of Reiwa. Like, again, like, just, it's not much, but I mean, like, I mean that's kind of the issue, that it's not much because again, we barely had a third quarter. I think it was just this and Boost Mark 9 for quarter 3, and quarter 2 was just 4 things. Like, it's kind of sad with how much, like, it's just sad, like, with how much products are, like, being decreased within Geats, or within Ryder. I mean, I think Geats did a good job at actually managing it well. You know, like, obviously, like, Geats is now moving into, like, the point of, like, pushing everything to Premium Bandai, but, like, for Geats, that wasn't as egregious as Revice. Because basically the stuff that were Premium Bandai for Geats was basically expected. And it helps that for Geats, most of this was leaked to us beforehand. So it made it less hurtful to ourselves. I feel like Revice was just pretty bad at basically locking the core gimmick into Premium Bandai. Because at least Xaid went through the effort of trying to push them in retail, in a way. Or like finding ways of putting the gimmick out without just immediately doing it in Premium Bandai. I think Geats did what it needed to do within quarter 1. I feel like they could have, again, pushed out a bit more within the second and third quarters. Like, I think honestly, they probably should have released the, like, they probably should have released some of the armed weapons that we don't have yet as just toy exclusives, just to keep the line, like, just to keep the momentum up. Like, again, the fact that we, like I said before, the fact that we had Shokugan Set 5 was a miracle to an extent. And then just, you know, it's cool that we got things like the Laser Raise Riser, just to, like, again, have some resemblance of, like, a quote-unquote, like, secondary transformation device. And then, like, after that, it's, you know, Final Form stuff. So, like, I'm still not too big on the current state of Ryder retail toy releases. I know everyone talks about how the core IDs should have been a Gashapon release, even though they clearly stated they didn't want people to feel the need to buy those things, or parents especially, because they didn't want to confuse the consumers of what the gimmick was, because they wanted to be upfront about the fact that it was It was not the core IDs. It was the raised buckles, which is why the core IDs are exclusive in the first place. I don't get why no one understands that. You gotta view this in the mind of a Japanese parent. You can't look at this as a collector. Like, I don't know. I guess I try to just summarize these things in both statements as a collector, but as like someone that wants to generally buy these things for your kid. I don't know. I think the retail line for Geats is fine. They could have done a better job at keeping the momentum up at things. I don't know, it just seems like a thing that Bandai's been struggling lately of just trying to keep momentum up within the retail side and not just a general side. This thing keeps overheating. But yeah, obviously that'll have to do with, well, first of all, that'll have to do with this review, but also, you know, I think for how Geats ended its retail line, I think it's fine. We obviously have to cover the back half of the toy line, which is the second half of premium stuff. But obviously that'll come in the near future and such. And obviously that's all slowly trickling out now and such. So obviously I'll try to cover that as soon as I can gather them and such. But yeah, that'll have to do with this review. This is Ryder now with people. I got a minute left and this camera really wants to overheat. I need to move all this footage out. Bye.